Hi there, graders. Today we are going to do lesson 3.7, which is all about multiplying by 1 and multiplying by 0. So I thought we could start off by just talking about what that means before we do any workbook pages, because we will be doing a workbook page after this. So let's start off by talking about multiplying by 1. So 1 times 1 equals 1. 1 times 2 equals 2. 1 times 3 equals 3. Whenever you have a number multiplied by 1 or 1 multiplied by any other number, that answer, the product, which is the answer to a multiplication problem, is going to be the same as that number. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is also going to be 2. And you know what? Because of the commutative property of multiplication that we learned about, 2 times 1 would also be 2. You can flip-flop. And let me show you why 2 times 1 is 2. So if you have two groups of 1, two groups of 1 in each group, two groups of 1, that means that you add 1 plus 1, right? Because you have 1 in each group, and that equals 2. So 2 groups of 1 equals 2. The same as with any number. You could have 4 million times 1, and the product, the answer, would be 4 million. Okay, so that means that 1 times 4 equals, what do you think? 4. And if we flip-flop and do 4 times 1, the answer, the product, is also going to be 4. You can do this with any single number ever. What about 0 times 1? I forgot to write that one. What do you think that is? 0 groups of 1. Well, if you have 0 groups, you can't draw anything, right? So you have nothing. 0 times 1 is 0. What about 5 times 1? 5. And if we flip-flop that and do 1 times 5, the answer would also be 5, because if we have one group of 5, one group of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many are there in all? There's just 5. So one group of 5 equals 5. That's 1 times 5 equals 5. So now that we have learned about multiplying by 1, let's talk about multiplying by 0, which is just as easy. So multiplying by 0 is very, very simple. And if we do 0 times 1, that's 0. 0 times 2 is also 0. 0 times 3 is 0. And the reason for that is because if you have 0 groups, you don't have any objects to count. So if I have 0 groups of 1, I don't have any groups in the first place. Does that make sense? Or if I had 1 times 0, that would also be 0. Because if I had one group, right? If I had one group with nothing inside of that group, the answer is 0. There's 0 objects. Okay, so that means that 0 times 4 would be, what do you think? 0. And 0 times 5, that's 0. What about 5 times 0? What if we do a flip-flop? It would still be 0. Any number multiplied by 0 is 0. You could have 276 times 0. And the answer, the product, would be 0. Or you could have 0 times 500. That would still be 0 because you would have 0 groups, right? 0 groups of 500 would be nothing because you have 0 groups to put the objects in. Okay, so now that we have talked about multiplying by 1 and multiplying by 0, I would like for you to get out your big math workbook. For my students, you have it in a packet that looks like this, and it says Big Math Workbook on the front. for Mrs. Hepner's class, or Mr. Rakestraw's class, and for Mrs. Rutai's class, you'll need to get out your big math workbook, I believe, unless they made packets for you. And everyone will need to turn to page 125. So please pause this video until you have turned to page 125 in your big math workbook. Okay, now that we're all set, we are going to do the first couple problems together, and then you'll do the rest on your own. So let me grab a pencil. The first one, oops, these are all unsharpened pencils. I need to get some new sharpened pencils. All right, here we go. I'm ready now. So you'll need a pencil as well, okay? So let's start with number 1. What multiplication sentence matches this picture? Find the product. All right, so this is the picture that they're talking about. And it looks like we have one group because there's one bowl. So there's one group of, how many apples are in the bowl? 3, right? 1, 2, 3. So 1 times 3, because there is one group of 3. And how many apples are there in all? 3. Remember that 1 times any number is going to be that same number. And we can also write 3 times 1, and that would also equal 3. So remember, you should be following along with me, writing this down on your paper. Okay. Now we have to find the product. Remember that the product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So 5 times 1. Well, I can remember that any number multiplied by 1 is going to be that same number. So it's going to be 5. We could also do 1 times 5 equals 5. 1 times any number is going to be that same number. Let's do number 3, 0 times 2. Well, if I have 0 groups of 2, I don't have any groups. So I can't have any objects. I don't have any groups of 2. So the answer is 0. 0 multiplied by any number is going to be 0. 4 times 0. What do you think that is? 0. What about 1 times 6? If you have one group of 6, what would the answer be? What is the product? If you're thinking 6, you are correct. 1 times any number is that same number. 3 times 0 for number 6. If you're thinking 0, you're right. And also 0 times 3 also equals 0 by using the commutative property of multiplication. 1 times 2? What do you think that is? 1 times 2 is 2. Because if I have one group of 2, I have 2 objects in all. Number 8, 0 times 6. 0 times 6 is going to be 0. Same with 6 times 0 equals 0. And number 9, 8 times 1. If I have 8 groups of 1, how many objects do I have in all? 8 groups. 8 groups of 1. I have 8, right? That's the answer. I want to give you one more problem. What about 1 times 0? Would it be 1 or would it be 0? Let's draw a picture. one group of 0. So I have one group and 0 objects in it. So how many objects do I have inside this group? 0, right? So the answer to 1 times 0 is 0. And that is the same as 0 times 1 would also be 0. Okay? So what I want you to do now is do numbers 10 through 29. 10 through 29 on your own. And you don't need to take a picture of that. You can just do it, and then you can show your teacher tomorrow when you go to class. And you will also need to do a seesaw activity, a really short seesaw activity. So you're doing 10 through 29, and then you're going to go on seesaw and do a quick little exit ticket. Okay? So I hope that you liked this math lesson today. If you need to go back and rewatch some parts of this video so you can understand it a little bit better, feel free to do that, and I will talk to you later.